So I think I'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. The Ottawa SportsCar Club is really glad to have Trevor and Travis Hill from TWOth Autosport to talk about their different developments, both for race cars and for drivers, and talk a little bit about the programs that they have. They've both been involved in motorsports for multiple decades. And have been involved in events such as the Rolex 24, series like Grand Am, and more recently, series like the Fell Motorsports Sports Car Series, Radical Cup, and of course the race series at Calabogie as well. So thank you, everyone. They're going to do a couple of short presentations tonight, and then at the end they'll try to take some questions. So if everyone has some questions, they can ask them sort of as they put pauses in tonight's presentation. And if you're joining, please go on mute so that we can hear our guests clearly. So I guess I hand it over now to Trevor and Travis. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Richard. A lot of familiar faces we see, obviously, with the Ottawa SportsCar Club. We're fortunate to be, obviously, here at Calabogie and to have a great community of people at all different levels of motorsports. But we obviously get to see a lot of you guys, whether we're just at Calabogie, but whether we're at Calabogie doing a track day or an evening day, or if we're away at Mosport or CTMP, like we were last weekend, seeing a few of the familiar faces. We're just inside our lounge right now at the racetrack at Calabogie. We're still working. It's long days. And we also have our dogs here. So if you happen to hear a bark every once in a while, it's probably not Trevor and I. It could be us, but not likely us. But just bear with us. That way we can deal with the dogs and make sure everyone's taken care of. Just to start out, as Richard was saying, we have been fortunate enough to be able to do quite a lot of racing for multiple decades. We've been involved in racing since we were kids. And this is a good opportunity just to talk to a lot of people that we see day to day that we may not get the chance to actually sit down and talk and understand each other a little bit better and what we do and kind of where we came from. For those of you that don't know or may not know what we work on right now or what our current business and racing team looks like, we really are about 4 or 5 racing teams into one. The famous saying we used to hear is, how do you make $1 million in motorsports? Well, you start with a couple of $1 million. Exactly. And that's kind of a well-known saying, but a bit of a pet peeve of ours for years. We weren't fortunate enough to come into this racing industry with a ton of money or a family that was able to really, really financially support us and allow us to do whatever we wanted and race whatever cars we wanted. So we did have to, there she goes. We did have to work a lot from the ground up and understand, what it takes to do this, which fortunately now I think gives us a lot of that experience and work ethic that we've been focusing on for over 20 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. Complete honesty, we never expected that we would get to still be doing this at this point, or that the business would be this successful. We're very fortunate. Obviously, we know how difficult of an industry this is. So thanks for at least taking time listening, being part of this journey, and hopefully we'll be able to work together a little bit more as we keep growing. Currently, our programs, we do a number of different racing programs. Our main focus is motorsports. We've worked on a lot of street cars, but our heart and our passion is in racing. We're very competitive. And as a lot of you guys know, it doesn't really matter the size or the speed or the weight of the car. If you have a field of competitive cars, you will find yourself in a race and you'll have a great time. As great example, the Spec Miata series at Calabogie Motorsports Park right now. Not exactly the fastest cars, but often the closest races. And for us, that's really where a lot of that passion goes to, is being able to be in a competitive series and understanding what it takes to win in those series. So our multiple focus points or different racing programs that we offer right now is the CMP Challenge, so the evening series at Calabogie. We do some radicals and the Miatas as a big focus point, as well as our Hondas. It's a good opening championship to develop driver development, racecraft development, understand as a driver the processes of a racing event, as all of you guys know, obviously very much so involved with setting up a lot of those events. We also do Champ Car, which is really our budget-based endurance racing platform, which should be growing pretty soon as we can start to go back south of the border. We also do the FEL Radical Cup Canada, so radical endurance racing and sprint racing, as well as the FEL Sports Car Championship Canada, where we run an Audi Sport customer racing team and field currently 4 Audi TCRs. We should be expecting 5 and potentially 6 with us at some points throughout the season, which will make for very busy weekends, but obviously it's hard to complain when you're doing something you love. It's a lot of racing, a lot of programs that we currently work on. The business has grown quite nicely over the last 10 plus years, thanks to a lot of working, obviously, and a lot of good dedication from our drivers and our staff, our crew. Obviously, there's no way that we can do this just ourselves. And a lot of this adventure, I'd say, we've been on has really been about building a business and understanding our business. So that's been a really cool experience for us. A little bit of our history, where we started. So Trevor and I started racing go-karts together when we were younger, a very standard path for people that are looking to make their careers in motorsports. We started with a go-kart in our driveway. I don't know, how old were you?
I would have been about 10 years old because our father was into karting in the 80s with National Capital Kart Club. So when we were growing up, we wanted to do that, but he decided, that with family coming around, okay, maybe I'll put go-karting aside. And he focused on family life. And it wasn't too long after that we kept pushing and pushing and pushing, that he decided, okay, I'll let you guys race. I'll let you guys get into go-karting, but you have to work for it. And I think it was 1 summer or 2 summers, Travis and I had to cut grass for our family. The houses and family members, grandparents, and with the money that we would make, our father would match it. And we bought our first go-kart, and we would drive it around we had a long cinder driveway. We would drive it around that until he finally realized, okay, this isn't just a little fad for us. We actually want to go racing. So I think it was 97, I think, when we started going to motorsport back then, when the new go-kart track was built, and we started running 2-stroke stuff. We never did any 4-stroke stuff.
No, we did 2-stroke racing, Yamaha PP Can, and then got into SCUSA with 80cc shifter karts.
Yep.
And up to 125cc shifter karts. We played in the Ron Fellows Karting Championship when it was first starting out in the early 2000s, and then started working with a manufacturer actually based out of the US. Well, there was an Italian manufacturer named Allkart, which had a primary dealer and importer for North America based out of the States. And they were running what's called the WKA National Road Racing Series. So they went to a lot of the sports car racing tracks and took karts there. So there was an opportunity to race a shifter kart at places like Daytona and Road Atlanta and Mid-Ohio. So with the work ethic that our dad was kind of pushing on us, that we had to really, once we had the karts, we had to work on our own karts. Often Trevor would be building motors as well.
We would have to prep the trailer. Our dad would never take in the race trailer. He would only hook up the motorhome. And if their parts weren't ready and he's hooked up, we're
not going racing.
Yeah, we're not going racing. We were shit out of luck. So it kind of taught us that you had to work on your own stuff. And sometimes that was a lot of long nights. But if you wanted to go racing, it kind of taught you that work ethic, that you had to work for this.
Yeah, tearing down karts at night, like a Friday night or a Saturday night, if it wasn't working well. I'm sure a lot of the people that are running their own cars know this, but having to tear it down in the middle of a paddock one night and making sure that you're finding those tenths of a second or that second if you're way off pace in that case. But going through data systems and playing with setup and all of that, I mean, you take the go-kart out of that, and it's the same story for a lot of race weekends for a lot of people that are trying to learn not only the technical aspect of the car right now, whether they're coming to Calabogie or going to a track day or whatever it happens to be, but also then understanding what you need to do as a driver and what you want to focus on. Currently, we, in our business with TWOth Autosport, for those that don't know, the TWOth stands for 2TH, which is Trevor Hill and Travis Hill. But currently, when we're racing, I tend to end up being fortunate enough to jump in a lot of the cars and have done a lot of the car racing. But when we were in karting, we were both racing. Trevor was 2 years older than me, which meant he got the first kick at the can for a lot of those karts and a lot of those new bigger classes, and has a lot of racing pedigree behind him and a lot of US national wins and big events. So I know sometimes, case in point, when we ran the Miata race last weekend, the CMP Challenge, that Trevor jumped in the car and does quite well. Sometimes people are surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm just thankful he's not in the bigger cars, because he would make me look bad and I might lose my job. So it's good. But over the years, as we've evolved, I ended up going to school for graphic design. I was always into art and development and how things looked. And Trevor was very technical and was the one that was smiling as he had to tear apart his cart at night. I not so much. I wanted to make sure the vinyl was still on there properly. But as we evolved and got into the cars and into the business, obviously that's where we each kind of set our paths. So currently at TWOth, Trevor manages all of our technical services and everything inside the shop. We, as mentioned, have grown a little bit. So we are fortunate now to have a shop coordinator and a parts manager and some lead techs for our various racing programs to be able to make the business run. But inside that shop, most of that runs through Trevor at some point. And then myself, I'd say my shop area now would be our driver's lounge. My focus being on business development, working with our customers, our drivers, and planning what their longer term objectives are and programs, and then working with some of our partners and products that we work with day to day inside the cars or from a promotional side. So as we've evolved, that's kind of how it works out, and we're actually quite fortunate to have a bit of that yin and yang together to be able to hit kind of the multiple facets of the business, because as you guys all know, there's not just one job to do when you're going racing. There's a lot of things to focus on, and it helps being able to spread that out. Obviously, I won't tell that to his face, but it is really cool to be able to have a business with your brother and get to spend this much time together and mess around and yell at each other and all that stuff, as I'm sure some of our drivers and staff may have heard once in a while, but fortunately it doesn't happen too often. No. When we were finishing karts, to be honest, we did not expect to go farther than go-karts.
But we were told by our father, he had a budget that he could work with, but he says after go-karts, I can't take you to cars. Like, no. You guys are on your own. I got enough money for go-karts and that's it. So we kind of had to find our own paths and our own ways. And I know, like, Travis went to school for graphic design. I went to school for mechanics and then for accounting, because we had to figure out something to do after racing. Like, we couldn't continue this. We weren't going to go to formula cars. We weren't going to go to sports cars the way we wanted to. It wasn't in the cards for us, I guess you'd say.
Yeah. What ended up bringing us into cars is one point, I was in college. I got an email from a team that was based out of BC. We had done a couple kart races in conjunction with Grand Am. The karts were a special invite. It was actually at Barber Motorsport Park in Birmingham, Alabama, which coincidentally ended up being pretty much the sister track to Calabogie. So we were racing there during the Grand Am weekend in the shifters and in Rotax Max, and did quite well. We won by quite a large margin and were able to talk to some teams. And as we see it now, obviously, you look to karting as a potential where you would find the next drivers that want to make a career in motorsports or in sports car racing. So I got an email with a team from BC, a Porsche team called Bullet Racing. They were based out of Vancouver and racing at Mission Raceway, and decided to drop out of school and use the rest of my student line of credit to pay to go race cars, because why wouldn't you? I had done what I wanted to do in graphic design, and for some reason, our parents said that was an okay idea. And this was essentially the tuition to what we wanted our business to be and what we wanted our careers to be, not knowing that it would come to this. So we did that. It was fairly successful. We were very comfortable with them. They were running some Grand Am races. They made a few entries into the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. So the first time we got to go there in 2008 or 2009, they were running a GT3 Cup and had drivers like Case Mearop and Ross Bentley as some of the drivers in the car, which was a really cool opportunity for young guys to meet those legends, really, and see that and understand the model and start to understand the industry. And not unfortunately, I think Bullet was great and did a lot considering where they were. But we decided to start working with a group like TRG, which is where we started talking and trying to get rides together and all of that afterwards, just to try to have a little bit more of infrastructure around us. As a young driver, I was concerned. I felt like while the smaller team required the budget and required the funding, which is really where the money comes from to make these cars go around in circles, is often the driver. Because we didn't have a lot of that budget and there was a lot we wanted to learn and we liked being hands-on, it made a lot of sense to work with a TRG to learn a bit more about the business of motorsports and how to work with customers. When we were at Daytona with them in, I think, 2009 and 2010 and 11, they had 5 entries. And you had, one car was for a group of gentlemen drivers, another car, which was actually where I ended up going. I didn't have a ton of budget, enough to pay for a test. And fortunately, the gentlemen drivers were happy to keep us around. The unfortunate part and part of sports car racing is the car got crashed fairly early, and I never even got in the car during the race. Got to test, got to be part of it, but never got to turn the lap during actual competition, which is something we've come to know, and it's part of motorsports. But following that, Calabogie was just built. A new opportunity, a very new market, and we were really excited to try to be part of this. So in
our own backyard.
In our own backyard, yeah. The idea of having a sports car racing track in Ottawa was just unheard of. And the fact this was a new market and a new place to show some of our abilities and start to leave our own mark on motorsports was a really cool opportunity. So I came up with Jim Hodnott and Perry Bortolotti for my first track day to coach them a little bit, ride with them a little bit and drive and just see what this place was all about. And obviously got to meet a lot of the people. And as most of you know and are perfect examples of it, Calabogie is a unique environment where people want to work together. They love the industry and they really are just here to enjoy it and help one another out. And now we have someone joining us on the couch. But now we have try to keep some of that same culture to work with people and help each other out. I know a couple of the other race teams based at Calabogie, like Power Sports and Mortimer and anyone else, we've often really tried to push that we may compete against people on the racetrack, but off the racetrack, we all do need to help each other out. And at some point, you're going to need a spare part. You're going to need tires. You're going to need to talk to somebody. There's no point trying to, push buttons or create issues when you're going to be working with these people for quite a while. So that became fairly important to us and still is, and kind of building that culture around your team and around what you want to do. Here, when we were at Calabogie as the business, we didn't have a TWOth Autosport business. So as things started to grow, we worked with a few customers doing coaching. I became a coach and wanted to start building my pedigree a little bit more and learning and really diving into coaching. This was showing to be an opportunity to get to be in cars and around cars. And obviously, if you don't have any money to go racing, but you like going racing, you should probably hang out near a racetrack. And good chances someone might understand and may have a business and may want to support, et cetera, et cetera. The very long way is what we did. Start a business and do it ourselves, which some days is questionable, but most of the days it's very fun and rewarding. But as we built it up, we started working with different clients that needed a hand with coaching on track, whether driver services or some technical support in the paddock. You often hear, and a lot of people have their own philosophies or ideas, but you hear sometimes some backwards advice going on, and you really need to understand the car, understand the driver, understand what their goals are, what their experience is, what the setup is, because as a lot of you guys might know, what someone may think is a fast and capable car on the street, once you start actually dealing with physics and setup and spring rates and alignments, that person can go down the wrong path really quickly. A good example of this would be adjustable coilovers. That idea is, it's a performance enhancing part, yes, but the more expensive you go with a coilover, often the narrower that window is for performance or for optimal performance, and the easier it is to tune yourself completely out and to end up over rotating a car or happening to find the wall at the exit of turn one. So really how you systematically approach that was really important to us and became part of that foundation. The other thing we noticed, as a lot of people on here might understand, is just because you can afford that fast car doesn't necessarily mean you should jump in that fast car. And understanding what these ladder systems are, whether it's the ladder system of different types of cars as you progress, or understanding what the ladder system of the industry is in general, is really important. And respecting it and getting comfortable. Again, we still use now the Miatas as one of our entry-level cars, but it's a front engine, rear wheel drive car. And if a driver can't get between 80 and 110%, right, you need to kind of go over the edge a little bit to understand where that edge is. If a driver isn't able to get that or extract that out of the car and feel comfortable, there's no way he or she should be jumping up to the next faster car, because they'll only be more nervous about that car. And then obviously the technical side of supporting that car and building it and having it do what that driver wants it to do and give them confidence to be able to push that. So seeing that and identifying that as in the paddock was really big for us. And just wanting to navigate and guide some of our drivers or other clients, other people around the track through that, I think is important. It keeps them safe. It keeps us all safe on track. Again, I'm preaching to the choir here with the Ottawa SportsCar Club. So you guys understand that and a lot of the purpose of why you need to approach this sport fairly safely. The other beautiful thing about Calabogie and a lot of the clients that are, and again, a lot of you guys, is the people that are able to do this are usually fairly successful in their personal lives to be able to afford to do such a sport like this. And regardless of their success, everybody has some value to bring. But the really important part for us and where that helped us was a lot of them become mentors. So as our customers or our fellow coaches or people we see in the paddock, they have a lot of life experience. We have been racing for a couple of decades, but we aren't very many decades old. So I'm 32 right now, Trevor's 34. There's still a lot we can learn from a lot of people. A lot of people with a lot more life experience than we have. And I know often, even just within our own shop, we're a couple of the youngest people at TWOth, which is a good example or proof that there's still a lot to learn. And as a team, we can get better. With those mentors, one of the first ones I met would be Steve Bruder, who was one of our instructors here at Calabogie. And he was helping me create business plans and help build that pedigree and get myself recognized with Calabogie, so people knew, okay, who is this guy and what has he done? Because as I think I was 18 or 19 at the time, to jump into a car with someone and coach them, someone who's successful, who's likely in a sports car that at the time I never thought, well, I still can't afford. What are they going to learn from me, right? And the idea is, what's this kid going to teach me? And the beauty of the racing industry was it didn't matter who you were outside the paddock. It really mattered what you did on track or inside the paddock and how you communicated with people and just how you approached this. So it was a good opportunity, but we needed to try to sell that secret. So a guy like Steve Bruder really helped with a lot of that stuff. And even now, a lot of our customers and everyone around is just a great mentor to help work with us. So the mentorship is really important. And just again, as members, like you guys, leveraging some of that network around us and ideas, whether it's based on your driving or based on what you're doing, out of the track. There's a lot of value there, and the power of this network of people is just incredible. We know Ottawa typically isn't known to be as flashy as a Toronto or a Montreal, but there are a lot of very capable, smart individuals here, and working together, we can be a lot stronger than working as individuals. The other thing, we've got a couple of notes here. Other examples being Penske, when we were younger, watching NASCAR racing and whatever sports car racing we've watched. Obviously, they were running a lot of the Porsches as well at the time. But the idea of working in numbers and the scale, the size, gave them so many opportunities to extract more out of it. If you have 3 or 4 cars going out for a single practice, it means you have 3 or 4 times as many opportunities to learn what setup is going to work, what isn't going to work, and it makes you a little bit more competitive against your competition on track. So Penske helps a lot. And of course, companies like Multimatic and FAF now, especially, paving the way to show that a Canadian business can, or a Canadian motorsport business can be sustainable, can work if you're smart about it. Now we're very fortunate to have been able to work with a lot of those guys. With Multimatic, we did a partnership program with FAF and Porsche Cup. So again, working with those guys, I think, has been really helpful for us. Regarding that growth, I think the big thing for us and for anybody out there that wants to potentially start a race team or scale something like this was really focusing on our strengths. Again, Trevor being the technical side, me being the mouth, as you can tell, but also doing some design and some of that business development stuff. For us, I'd say our biggest differentiation because of that and thinking about that is with TWOth, we don't look at the race car as being the customer necessarily. And often when we talk about services on cars, it really is based on, how much that part costs and what the service is going to look like. But our customer really is the racer who wants to go racing and wants to win races. The beauty of the racing industry and that idea kind of encompasses a lot more than just a car, working on a car. I'll sell you a sway bar, I'll sell you a set of springs. It's so much more than that, because you need to know each other. You need to know where those goals are going, right? What kind of experience that driver has and what you need to work on and focus on to be able to get better. Because in order to win a race, you don't just need a fast car. You need a fast, reliable car that is compliant and comfortable, and a driver that understands what that car is doing and can then work within that, and communication with the team to help figure out what's next. So a lot of that is really, really coming down to what that driver needs. And I think that kind of really helps focus what our direction is and what our priority is where is that driver? Do they understand what they're getting into? Managing those expectations a little bit, and then building that pathway with that driver. Finding and building processes. We've got a few notes, there's a lot of stuff to discuss, but finding and building processes, another big thing. We'll start talking about that a little bit later on when we're talking about specific car prep stuff and driver prep. But just as scaling the business and making it scalable so that you don't grow too quickly and you can't manage it. Building those processes and trying to take some of our experience and pass it on to some of our other staff, but also taking the experience that some of our more experienced coworkers and crew have, and trying to build processes around it so that as a team, we can all get a little bit better and faster each weekend. And then obviously documenting a lot of that stuff. All these being standard business practices that I'm sure a lot of you folks are actually quite experienced with. But if we apply those processes to motorsports, you can be just as successful. We also noticed early on, depending on those processes, depending on what your driver or your customer was looking at, we were noticing about a typical shelf life or lifespan of a customer or a driver coming to a track day sometimes can be 2 to 3 years only. If you have a driver that is really excited about this industry, as a lot of us are, but doesn't have the right guidance, they can very quickly either spend way too much money or spend way too much time trying to focus on this, and maybe sometimes choosing to spend their money the wrong way, and spend their time the wrong way. So building that path and what you want to do, and understanding what cars to buy and what not to buy, and thinking about resale value and parts and all that stuff really does help extend the life of that customer or that driver in the program. Now, for an Ottawa SportsCar Club, that's also an opportunity to think about, and you guys are practicing this all the time, keeping people safe and giving them the right direction. But it really does help keep this community together longer. It allows us to play together a little bit longer, which makes the whole industry better and gives us people to race against. Because if we were driving around the track by ourselves, it wouldn't be a race and it would be fairly boring. And we'd often give up or crash at some point. So having people to race with is really important, and keeping people at the track, understanding why they're at the track and what some of those pain points are, which sometimes gets people leaving the track. Now, that said, you still have to manage expectations. Things still break, things still fail. We are certainly not perfect. We have plenty of engines we have to rebuild. We have a lot of damage that we have to work with. But if you have a team that understands that, and a group that you're working with that knows that shit happens and we have to fix it, it is what it is. But if you have a driver that is listening and working with you as a team and has an accident, the team wants to work together to help them and get them back out. If you have someone that isn't following direction and doesn't want to work with you and doesn't believe in the team, well, if that person has an issue, it's natural. Not everyone will be as motivated to jump in and help that person. Again, I'm sure you guys see that on a day-to-day in the paddock. We've been fortunate to scale and grow quite a lot. Approximately 50% growth year after year for us, between our overall revenue, our amount of races, our drivers,
Our cars,
the cars,
the shop, the people.
That has been taking a lot of energy to obviously work on and try to scale it. And I know it's surprised a lot of people. There's a lot to it. Obviously, we can very quickly find ourselves overwhelmed and not being able to have the bandwidth. So then that causes you to build processes and just try to streamline those processes, I'd say, as well as you can. We started in terms of scaling and managing that growth with endurance racing, and that really helped build it in Champ Car. The idea of being able to prep a car and then split the costs 4 ways so it's more manageable for the drivers was good for them and good for us at the same time, because it kept us employed, allowed us to keep doing races, and then allowed us to scale our Honda program.
Our first year we had one car.
It was a 96 EK Civic hatchback. And
It was your high school car.
It was my college car.
College
My high
car.
school car was an EG.
Oh, okay.
And the college car was an EK, which coincidentally, we still have an EG and an EK sitting in the shop.
Not the same ones though.
No, we've gone through a few chassis since then. At this point, that model allowed us also to build in transport, and then build up to a transport truck and trailer. Being able to split the costs.
I'd have to say probably when we were in karting or high school, we'd never expect to be owning a transport to go to races.
Yeah.
But now it's almost like a given, not because you have to have it, but it's once you've built those processes and you've been able to work out the details, it's actually not as difficult as we once thought it was. It's a big pie in the sky thing, but no, I almost don't know how we figured it out beforehand without that transport, because you can scale now, and the cost of fuel and the cost of the truck and trailer to haul one car is the same thing as it costs to haul 4 cars.
If you have a bigger trailer.
Yeah, that could work out really well.
It takes a little bit of capital, obviously, or some credit. And obviously, this is where some of our drivers and our customers come in and have really helped build that model for us, just helping us with understanding the financials, but also the transport. We have a great example in Ron Tomlinson, who's obviously one of the best people you could ask about how to manage a transport and what some of those costs might look like, and how often you need to service it. But once we bring it in, if we look at a good example, going to Laguna Seca with Champ Car, because we could haul 3 or 4 cars, which had 3 or 4 drivers per car. If you have 4 cars, 4 drivers, you've got 16 ways to split that transport cost, and you're only paying 1 truck to move across the continent. So then that made it a little bit more cost effective for the drivers, because then our drivers could race with a team that they knew, in a car that they knew, with a crew that they knew, that they'd been working together all season. But it only cost about $5,000 to do Laguna Seca with that car, with that team. And now you have a more competitive package versus calling a team that you didn't know, or hoping to network, renting a seat, hoping you have the reliability, hoping you've got equal mindset drivers. It really needed to come together like that. And some of that scaling, multiple cars, and now multiple cars within each program, really did help to make that happen. And also because of just the environment and dynamic. It's fun going racing, but it's fun going racing with friends and with buddies you can deal with problems with, and solve problems together, and have a beer after and talk about shit. Talk about whatever's giving you a headache at work. For me, it's my coworker. But it's important to a lot of us, and it kept a lot of us just having fun going to track. Everybody talking about COVID, obviously, over the past year. A lot of what we're seeing in the paddock day to day now is more just hanging out and catching up with people that we share a big passion with, and you want to share that together. So having the ability to scale like that and keep groups of people together was really important, and has certainly paid off with TWOth as a group. That said, team dynamic becomes a really important part of that. We are spending a lot of race weekends together, whether it be our crew or our drivers. So fortunately, we're in a position now where we can somewhat manage or hire and fire some customers if need be. But you realize what works and what doesn't. We're spending so much time together that nobody wants to be unhappy in a group. So really that team dynamic has become a huge priority for us. For again, like a lot of you only have so many weekends available. And in some cases, we spend more weekends with our drivers and our crew than they do with their family. So having that group, having everyone comfortable was really important there. Right now, where we sit, we have some long-term objectives. We've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of partners and a lot of fun customers and crew and everything we've been able to do. Worked with groups like Operation Motorsport, which is one that I definitely want to make sure we put out there and talk to you guys. I know Ottawa SportsCar Club has been a big part of supporting Operation Motorsport, which is our veteran program that we work with, Canadian and US based, a Canadian nonprofit and a US nonprofit and Canadian charity. We work with medically discharged veterans and bring them out to race weekends, where if there were a crew position that they would love to be on, we train them, build them into that position, get them comfortable, make sure they're comfortable as part of the team. And then as they evolve, they can even go into a fully paid position and travel with us, or work with manufacturers, work with other teams. Some big success stories have come out of this Canadian program, being Theo, who's one of our engineers on our Audi program, who's also racing in the Spec Miata Challenge in our 41 car. And Dale, who's actually now crewing on that 41 car Miata. Theo is a veteran, medically discharged, and didn't have a whole lot of guidance or a path for himself, didn't know what he wanted to do, and found himself into motorsports with this group of people. But he's now been to the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. He's worked with teams like Allegra, with TWOth Autosport, the Porsche Factory RSR program. It's been really cool to see another person evolve like that and get comfortable and really come into his own. just looking at some of our long-term objectives with some of those guys. For us personally, just the next big things we want to focus on is more of our female driver development. We have a few female drivers that are working with us right now that, sorry guys, that have been making some really good progress over the last couple seasons. We're excited to see where they're going to go. Some of you have seen Megan Tomlinson, which would be Ron's daughter, who's making a lot of progress. We have a few other female drivers this season that have been test drivers with us as well. Another good example would be Meg Leahy, who Hugh, one of our drivers in Champ Car and in the Radical, his daughter's jumping in and enjoying the Miatas, starting with track days and then hopefully building up as she gets more comfortable and jumping into some racing with the CMP Challenge. So that's a big priority for us. Manufacturer involvement, obviously, to help keep things going and working within the industry and some of those manufacturers that we look up to all the time. Very fortunate to have a great relationship with Audi right now as an Audi Sport customer racing team. On a personal side, I'm lucky to work with Porsche as well and do a lot of those programs around the world, which have helped build our pedigree and help with our network and just learn a lot about what we're doing. Specifically in racing, obviously our next step or where we want to go is towards IMSA, doing some endurance racing, TCR, and then see where the growth goes there. But some of our big goals, which we are working actively towards, would be the Rolex 24 Hours. We definitely want to run a TWOth car at the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona and Le Mans. I don't think I know very many people in racing that don't know what Le Mans is and don't have a dream of going there. And fortunately, right now, we have some really good people that are at Calabogie that have obviously been the only Canadian team to win Le Mans, being Multimatic. So that's someone we definitely will be working on persuading and working with a little bit more, see what opportunities there are. But I wouldn't be surprised if we end up going to some of those pointier areas. I guess time will tell, and hopefully we can do it all together. That's a little bit of detail about TWOth Autosport. I know it's a lot, talk a lot. There's been a lot going on and a lot of programs. If anyone has any specific questions about TWOth, we can discuss or ask away. Otherwise, we can start to roll into navigating the sports car industry and then talking a little bit about the car and driver prep. So if anyone has any questions, feel free. If not, we can move forward. Perfect. That's easy. Either we answered a lot or we confused a lot of people. Navigating sports car racing. Obviously, you guys know what sports car racing is like. But for us, is really just understanding what the purpose of a lot of those levels are, from your first track days to local racing, local clubs, things like Calabogie, the Calabogie Evening Series, and then getting into regional racing, national level racing, and international racing. Both from the driver experience, the car side, and the licensing navigation as well becomes really important. Again, I'm speaking to people that have a lot of experience in this, but as a team and as an organization, knowing that and working within that has been really important. Also, spreading across multiple levels like that really helped us build a bit of a ladder system, and that ladder system is known across the industry as how you navigate through racing, but it's something that really does help pave the way, and something we've been focusing on, really educating our customers or our drivers on, knowing the purpose and what you want to try to achieve at those different levels as you progress, and obviously how to get that next license, racing license, what the sanctioning bodies are looking for, what the purpose of those licenses are. So just understanding and really being comfortable with that has been a big key. And obviously for any drivers that are looking to continue to progress that way, definitely want to read into it and support a lot of those systems. Right now, good example, any of the drivers that join our team, I should also say this, but based on the growth and some of our bandwidth really becomes bandwidth. We want to manage expectations, but we also don't want to set ourselves up for failure. So at this point for TWOth, our serious drivers, those that want to be in a racing program, would join the team. So we have a team fee for our drivers that gets some initial swag and clothing and things like that, but also gets them access in here to the lounge as a space where they can come and relax, sit in the AC. We go over video and data work inside this lounge. We have the 3 simulators set up now, two primaries, one being full motion one where we can actually run a TWOth Miata on Calabogie. That's been quite important, but in that team membership, that helps cover a bit of time for us to sit down with that driver and build what their performance program would look like, or what their learning path would look like, and what we need to work on, what some of those specific goals should be, bringing in some of our coaches and engineers to be able to help. I do coaching, but surprisingly, I actually haven't done a whole lot of coaching lately with TWOth. Just time, bandwidth. So we have coaches like Rowan Smiley and Jose Decato and Ralph Thorge, and Francis Marquis. Who else? We have a lot of coaches at this point. Working with some of these guys that have a lot of experience. They have more experience than we do in a lot of areas and have a lot of value to bring. But all those drivers that are coming into the program end up with an Ottawa SportsCar Club membership. If you're a driver, whether you're racing in the local championship or happen to be running a national or an IMSA, supporting the local club, being part of that community is really important, and just understanding and respecting that ladder system and what it's there for. So part of that membership for TWOth includes getting the Ottawa SportsCar Club membership and starting to see the value and the perks and what that has to offer. Touring car versus GT versus prototype. Obviously, the difference between the different type of car manufacturers, whether it's a car that you build on your own or a factory race car, a GT car, or a prototype car. Obviously, there are many different categories you can run in sports car racing, but just understanding the direction you want to go and then planning the platform based on that. Often drivers early on in their experience will pick the coolest car or the car that they think looks the fastest, etc. But you quickly develop a feel for a certain type of platform of car. Obviously, that's sometimes budget dependent as well. But keeping within that platform and understanding the purpose of it and navigating from there obviously becomes a big component of the entire industry. What kind of car you want to run, whether you want to go open wheel in some cases or closed wheel, again, prototype, etc. And then obviously understanding the different sprint race, endurance racing, and what skill set that brings. For sprint racing, many spots and positions as quickly as possible. But you don't often develop quite a strong car feel and vehicle sympathy. So mechanical sympathy, understanding what's happening to my tires throughout this, whereas endurance racing gets you a lot of that. Doing driver changes, understanding how a car evolves over the course of a longer run, what happens to the tires, teaches you a lot about the physics of what's going on inside the car. And what you need to do as a driver to understand your weight transfer and how you're affecting those tires. You can often obviously be faster with a set of slicks with sticky tires, but that set of slicks could also be a band-aid to a driver problem. Maybe you're on throttle too much, you've unloaded the nose, but you've got enough front grip in your brand new front sticker tires to be able to pull you through that. So in an endurance race, you're going to learn that probably between 30 minutes and 50 minutes into the stint. If you've abused your tires, you are going to know it, and you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to suffer. Another thing being risk versus reward in sprint racing versus endurance racing. I think, I don't know how many endurance races or 24-hour races we've done. Fortunately, with Champ Car, I think we stopped counting over 1,000 hours of competition.
We even did that 38 hours.
38 hour at PBIR.
Yeah,
Long Beach?
that was a grueling race.
Well, I think we battled on the lead lap for first place for about 25 to 30 hours.
Yeah.
Teaches you a lot. There's a lot to be learned in champ car racing or in budget endurance racing or any kind of budget racing, even for that matter. Again, Spec Miata, great example. But the difference between trying to find speed and then get yourself into a rhythm became quite important. And just having the two different facets and disciplines really helped us evolve and helped a lot of our drivers, and something to keep in mind for a lot of you guys if you're looking to go racing and really hone your skills and evolve as a driver. Keep endurance racing in mind, because it does help a lot and it teaches you a lot. And worst case scenario in a champ car race, you've got 3 to 5 buddies that you can drink beer with afterwards. Even if the car blows up, even if you put it in a wall, you've got friends to cry with or celebrate with. We can jump into car prep and then jump into driver prep. Do you want to talk a bit, or do you want me to keep talking?
Are you hoarse yet? No, I didn't think so. You might want some water.
Drink a bit of water.
All right, we'll jump into car prep. That's usually more of my forte, being a lot more technical. One of the things that we work on a lot with our drivers as well, but that we take care of here is understanding vehicle dynamics and knowing what to do and when to do it. We have, amongst the fleet of cars that we take care of, it's funny enough, we only own 1, 2. The rest are all customer cars, but they're all various drivetrain layouts. They're all different suspension setups. And so understanding how the drivetrains work, understanding how to make them work better, understanding all the setups on the different platforms, from a front engine, rear wheel drive, little Miata, which is all momentum based, to Honda Civics, front wheel drive, front engine, to the Audis. We've got the Radicals. We've done, like as Travis said, Porsche Cup stuff. So it's all understanding some of those platforms and understanding how to use them. There's a ton of electronics in a lot of these cars. We've been fortunate. We've stuck with one major electronics brand in terms of data acquisition and systems, and that would be AIM. I would say every single car of ours actually has an AIM product in it of some sort. But at least understanding that and staying on a specific platform. We've done our own wiring. We've done our own power distribution modules and everything else. We've had a lot of fun building cars like that, but for the most part, we've really enjoyed the factory prepped or specific class prepped cars like the Miatas, or factory built cars like the Audis or Porsche Cup. And the other part of understanding a lot of the dynamics is tire management. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 200 treadwear tire used in the Miatas or in champ cars, or full-on racing slicks. Tire management, understanding how tires work, and taking care, and the care and feeding of those tires is very important. And that's something that we teach our guys, staff inside the shop, whether we take them through courses, online stuff, whether it's learning on stuff here at the track, or even the customers on how to feel that and how to drive through those things. Tire management, especially at Calabogie, if most don't know, Calabogie is an anomaly of any racetrack that we ever been to come to for tire wear. There's not a single track we've ever encountered that wears tires like Calabogie. And some look at it as a bad thing because it costs a lot of money. Yeah, I could see Calabogie costs a lot of money for tires, but you learn so much here in terms of how to manage your tires as a driver and as a team to build cars, that I feel sometimes we can go almost anywhere and we have a leg up on any competition because of what we learned here at Calabogie.
We're really fortunate with Calabogie for that. Again, I'm preaching to the converted here, but there's a reason why Multimatic developed the Ford GT here, and it's not because it's quiet in the middle of nowhere. It's a very technical racetrack. It is hard on tires if your car is not set up properly for it.
Yes.
If you're abusing your tires, if you don't understand the weight transfer and what's going on and what tire you're asking or you're providing the most load to and then asking the most out of it, it will chew it up. But if you manage it properly, you can really develop that platform and understand the balance of the car and then understand the balance over the long run. It's a little hard on tires, yes, but I find it just speeds up the process, really. It's not particularly hard on any kind of tire. It's just that if you have an understeer, you will know.
We'll know very quickly.
If you have an oversteer, you'll know fairly quickly as well.
Yeah.
But from a car prep side too, just trying to bring a bit of value to those that are working on their own cars. Obviously, we know we're not likely going to work on every car. There's only so much bandwidth, and there's a lot of people that would rather work on their own cars, which is awesome. All the power to you. That's exactly where we started. But there are some important things to definitely keep in mind as you're approaching some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I say that I don't look to compete with people in the paddock, just on track. If you have questions about some of that stuff, don't be afraid to come and ask us.
No.
If you start getting really pointed questions, you may be asked to sign an NDA. Thank you, Ralph and Steve. But for the most part, we're open to talking about it because it is something that we all want to work on together and we're all getting better with.
Well, in the general scheme of things, as we say, we'd rather beat you on the racetrack, not beat you in the paddock before the race even started.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times I don't want to say we give away a lot of information, but we would give away some information to make sure that we still have a fun race, or our competition is still fun, right? In any aspect.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing to finish second if you gave it your all and someone was faster than you. It just shows you what you need to work on to get faster.
One of the other things we work on a lot in terms of car prep with our staff and our drivers is identifying the difference between a fast car and a safe car. That's usually a lot more identifiable in endurance races than it is in sprint races. Typically, in a sprint race, you want a fast car. It needs to be safe, yes, safe from a technical standpoint, but a safe car in terms of how it's set up and the vehicle dynamics of it, a safe car will last a hell of a lot longer and be easier for everybody to drive in an endurance race than it is in a sprint race. So there's a lot more to gain in the endurance races for that. And that's something we work on a lot with drivers, with the cars, with crew.
A good example I like to use often when we're taking people through the shop is set up fast to what we would like is very different from what someone new jumping into a car would like. Obviously, as a driver, you need to have the confidence in that car to be able to push those limits. But funny enough, our most difficult car to drive in our entire fleet of cars in the entire shop is the 1992 Honda Civic EG hatchback. Because it's not because it's the fastest car, but set up fast, it rotates fast. And you then as a driver need to be aware when it's going to rotate and understanding those dynamics. And a driver that has experience in that car can drive that car quickly. I see actually Joel on here, good example. A driver that understands the EG and understands what it needs. And coincidentally, as you understand that and you push that car, it actually craves more. It enjoys being driven hard like that. However, if you're a hesitant driver and nervous at all, or if you're having to overcorrect, or if you're going into a corner and you have to breathe out of the throttle, it'll still be fast, but it'll go really fast into the wall, which is not very good.
One chassis, one of those chump cars we replaced every year, the same chassis, the 3 or 4 years of Watkins Glen, because of the same sort of thing. It's a fast car. I can do everything we want to do, but you get the wrong combination of driver, skill, and car and scenario, and yeah, you're replacing a tub every single season, and we did that for almost 4 years straight.
It is now, if you're walking by the shop, it is now the very nice white Honda Civic EK that looks very freshly painted.
Because it's a fresh tub again.
The good thing is it gives a lot of opportunities to rebuild that car.
It looks good now.
It looks really good. Yeah, we figured it out. We're actually on, it was number 18 of the Civics that we've built. A lot of them are still around, but not all of them, unfortunately.
Some are in scrap piles.
But that's part of racing, and it's cheaper if you're developing as a driver. It's a hell of a lot cheaper to replace a Honda Civic fender than it is to replace a Porsche fender.
How do you know that?
I know.
You know.
That'll be on the next webinar.
Some of the processes that we go through, at least in our shop, it's not rocket science the way we look at it, but sometimes there's a lot of processes and steps that get missed when somebody, whether you're doing it at a home or other shops, doing things to get your car ready for a track day or a race event. Right? We usually start with a thorough visual inspection of the car, and it can be something simple as just walking around the car and looking for damage. But we pride ourselves in cleaning our cars. Usually, to start a weekend, we try to make sure that from every inch of that car to the wheels, the tires, the whole bodywork, everything is clean. Engine bays, everything's clean. We spend probably, I don't know, sometimes I think too much time cleaning, but that's me. But it is an aesthetic thing. And a clean car is always a nice car to work on.
Also allows you to, in the process, if you're going through and cleaning your car, you're identifying things.
Yep.
Are there cracks in the paint? Is something flexing? Are you starting to get a tired chassis? Do you have a weld going bad or breaking on a cage piece, which is obviously a very important safety component for you? Do you have cracks developing in wheels and spokes? Things fail. We are pushing the limits of a lot of these components, and doing a proper cleaning of your car will probably show you a lot more than you expected.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a good idea to keep that car nice and clean. Take the time to go through those sub-assemblies, your wheel, your inside the wheels, inside your suspension components, engine bay, etc. It could save your life, but it can also save you a lot of time on track and repairs and money.
Yeah. We do a lot of nut and bolt checks. Most of our cars have every spec and torque spec that we have, usually from the manufacturer. But after a while, hardware wears out. Before it breaks, it'll actually wear out. So sometimes checking those, replacing those almost on an annual basis, depending on how often the car is moving. We love paint markers. We've got different colored paint markers. Oh, what happened?
Dennis has to go.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis. Yeah, paint markers. We've even gotten into what's called cross-check paint. Anybody in the aerospace industry understands that. It's like a glob of almost looks like gel, different color stuff. So we use those a lot on things. And scheduled maintenance. We try to schedule all of our maintenance in terms of fluids, in terms of filters. We life components, so we monitor how many miles, kilometers, hours, maybe race events are on certain components, even down to from the chump cars. There's still street components. So even though on your street car it does 50,000 kilometers to 350,000 kilometers, sometimes it doesn't make it that far on a racetrack. So lifing components is a big thing. And then when we're done all of those things, then we get into a setup and alignment of the car. So we go through our notes, what has worked in the past, and we set up a car. We have a few flat pitches. We have raised tables. We've got turntables. We can set up a car and string it. We usually use strings over a laser alignment. I always say that the strings are red, so it kind of looks like a laser beam, but it's just a string set, right? It's no different than your fishing line. And we just create a perfectly square box around, and we just do our alignments from there. We do that at the shop. We do it at the track, wherever else we go.
Now, one thing to note for drivers or for those that are working on their own alignment in their own shop, one important thing is thinking about the tires, having consistent tires all around and consistent air pressure in your tires.
Yep.
That's something that people often overlook, but that will very quickly change your weight distribution if you happen to be doing a corner balance, but could also change how that wheel and tire is sitting to change the results that you're seeing on your alignment. So make sure if you are going to do an alignment yourself, you want a flat ground, you want consistent tires, if possible, or what we'll try to do. We'll try to put a brand new set of stickers on a tire or on a car. Sticker tires. That way, it's not worn out in different areas. There's no flat spots. And then making sure that you have that consistent air pressure in those tires.
Yep. And then last but not least, we usually check for spares. What do we have? What do we need? What are we missing? The nice thing about scaling some of our programs, we take care of 6 Miatas. We've got 4 Honda Civics, 4 Audis, 4 Radicals, 1 Porsche.
Yeah.
So that one is the anomaly. But having the scalability of all of these cars at least allows us to have multiple spares for cars, so that it doesn't matter what happens, except for maybe a blown motor or a completely destroyed chassis. For the most part, we've got the spares on hand that we can make changes, hopefully relatively quickly, to get someone back out. But spares are hugely important. I would say half of our shop is probably filled with spares of different sorts. And sometimes, depending on the car, like the Miatas are not new, the Honda Civics are not new. They're 25 to 30-year-old cars. So it's not like you can go out and buy control arms sometimes for some of these cars. You got to source parts from junkyards. You've got to refurbish them. You got to put bushings. You got to put ball joints and control arms together. So having those together and
rebuild brake calipers.
Yeah, we rebuild brake calipers sometimes if we have the time, instead of buying new ones, the seals aren't that expensive. They're $6 to $8 for a set of seals. Just takes a little bit of time to put them together. So, we use our winters to hopefully rebuild our spares, assuming we have the time. But the spares are very important if you're running a race car, a track day car,
or a championship. That
Yeah,
can make or break a championship.
yeah, exactly. What else do we have?
The other thing from car prep, managing series regulations and limitations, obviously, getting to know your rule book carefully, knowing where the gray areas are, I guess, where you can try to find a little more performance.
Yep.
And then obviously working with that series, tech inspections obviously becomes important, making sure that we have consistent equipment and our readings are consistent with what the series is getting. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you think you got in your shop for camber or ride height or your weights.
Yep.
It matters what the series thinks and whether you pass on their scales or pass on their gauge. So being well aware of that and communicating with those people. Then obviously documentation is really important. Just crossing your T's, dotting your I's, but also knowing how many hours you have on some of those components. How much life is left. Are you getting close to a rebuild time? Well, do you want to maybe do it just before the race weekend, or do you want to try to risk it and do it after the race weekend? It's up to you, but obviously when we're in a business and reliability matters, we're going to try to do it before that.
Yeah, we try to minimize downtime that way. But sometimes components could be lifed out halfway through the season. Well, you might choose to actually rebuild that before the season even begins.
Any questions there on some of that regarding the car prep there? Because I know a lot of people on here likely are working on some of their own cars and then looking at prep. No. Okay, then we'll just roll into the final one that we have, which is driver prep. That driver being our primary focus. First and foremost, everything really comes down to educating that driver and managing their expectations. You're not going to go to Le Mans in your first race season. You're not going to win the race in turn 1 even.
What?
So knowing that and mentally preparing yourself for that event and how you prep during the day, even down to eating and what you're doing, all does matter a lot with how successful you're going to be in your race or in your season or in your career or just in enjoying this hobby. Managing your expectations and what's realistic. It takes a lot of years to get good at something. That 10,000 hour rule, by the time you get to 10,000 hours, you'll know there's still even a lot more to learn, but you'll have an appreciation for the art of it. It's like the idea of rowing gears. Yes, a paddle shift is faster and it's going to get you there, but learning how to row gears and how to heel toe properly and understanding what that's doing with the vehicle platform and how that's going to affect your corner speed and your entry, etc., becomes quite important. And it's learning and appreciating that art. Developing a bit of mechanical sympathy obviously is hugely important. If you can't feel what's going on with the car, you won't know until it's happened. Then also that risk reward. in a couple of facets. We talk about risk reward in endurance racing versus sprint racing, but it's also down to when you want to make that pass, whether it's worth it. You know, you may have had position on that driver, but they didn't see you and they turned in on you. Either case, you're both fixing your car. In either case, you're both likely going to get a black flag. So just thinking about that, was that worthwhile? But also on the bigger perspective, bigger picture, we'll talk to a lot of our drivers in the Miata Challenge, for example. Do you need to risk it all for a last lap pass? Is that what the series is looking for? Is that going to make or break your career? Probably not. But having a little bit of that humility to hold yourself back, finish second, finish seventh, whatever it happens to be, and take that and learn and build from it. Just noticed some questions in here on the chat. Apologies that we did not notice it earlier. It's Joel. Speaking of nutrition, who drinks the most sponsored product at the shop, i.e. Red Bull? Yeah, we do go through a lot of Red Bull and making sure that we have plenty of energy for whatever's to come. I think it's become more of a habit now, but thank you, Red Bull, and providing us with some great energy. On the driver prep, continuing, just understanding that development ladder. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if you can't drive the Miata 80 to 110%, there's no point getting into Radical. Same thing applies for all of the cars, just progressing and understanding, you know, you want to be comfortable and confident and be able to race at a certain level before you decide to go up. If you're not getting the results you want, going to a faster car or a bigger series or a different track probably is not going to help you. It's going to take a bit of time just to sit there and develop. So just having those reasonable expectations and goals that you can achieve, and setting those goals for yourself so that you can be as successful as possible. And success doesn't necessarily mean winning the championship. Success means coming out of that season or that event or that session even with achieving the goals that you set ahead of time as you came into that, which takes a lot of self-reflection and thinking about what your goals are. But it just makes us more aware of what we're coming into. Understanding where you want to go. We deal with that often with some drivers. They may not know what they want to do and what they want to race.
They sometimes don't even know what's possible.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns in sports car racing. Series are constantly changing. Cars are constantly changing. Manufacturers are coming out with new cars or new models every 3-4 years. It's very difficult to navigate. But sitting down with people and learning about what those options are and what the budget is, I think a huge part of educating our customers and our drivers and our crew is understanding what the cost implication is going to be. I like to kind of say it's not our fault that racing is expensive. Racing is expensive, we all know this, but it is our responsibility to educate our drivers on what that expense might look like. That way you can make the more informed decision on what series should I run and what am I going to get out of this. I'll tell you though, the fun does not scale with the dollar.
No,
it definitely does not.
We have customers that can spend whatever they want and go racing the biggest and the brightest series. And a lot of times they have more fun, sometimes getting back into the Miatas or even going to champ car races with everybody else. And guys say that time and time and time again. They have more fun being able to step down and enjoy the racing than they are to keep spending more.
The other thing when it comes to jumping around a bit is as you're developing, try not to jump platforms. Sticking with a consistent platform, not only the same car, let's say staying in a Miata or staying in a Honda or whatever you happen to drive, but understanding the dynamic, like a front engine, front wheel drive car, and then growing that way. The scaling for us has been great for the whole program, for between the team to work on the same types of cars and engineering perspective, but also for the drivers to know if a driver's looking to race a TCR, which is a front engine, front wheel drive car, they may start in the Miata, but they're very quickly going to want to switch over to a Honda Civic or something else like the Nissan Sentras out there, the Micra Cup, all great examples. But trying to stay within that platform, you're going to get a lot more out of it, and you're going to be able to apply that to that next car and grow a little bit faster. There's a little bit less of a learning curve there. Then the next thing is also rent versus owning a car. A lot of people do want to buy their car and go up and play with their toy. Depending on what your goals are long term, sometimes it does make a lot of sense to rent a car. For us, from our experience, a lot of our drivers will stay in a Miata. If they've never been on track before, they may be in a Miata for 2 seasons, maybe 3. Yeah. But if they're looking to progress and climb the ladder, does it make sense to buy the car? Are you going to lose money or depreciation? Are you going to have to manage it? Are you going to have to buy a transport? Are you going to, all of these things. As you get to a pointier or more expensive car, you also deal with more depreciation on the car. You're talking about a $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 asset that could very quickly lose 50 grand as soon as you pull it off the lot. If you're building a car yourself, this is why we like looking at factory cars. Yes, they are more expensive to purchase, but if you purchase a car that's in a well-known series with a proper make, you're going to keep that resale value a little bit longer. You're going to have a parts list of what you need to buy. You don't have to think, well, what control arm came on this 92 Civic? Oh, what did we switch it to? And what is it? You don't have to worry about all that headache. Then if you manage the industry, right, or the market, understanding the generations of cars is what a manufacturer's goal is for selling these cars, and when is the next one going to come out, so that I can sell my car before the next one comes out, before it drops another 10, 20, 30, 50K. It's a big part of it. It saves a lot of budget that you can then put into more tires and more fuel and more hospitality and whatever you need as part of your building blocks. But making that smart decision when you need to purchase a car or when you want to rent from a team. Obviously, you all know there are plenty of great resources around Calabogie now that have car rentals available. Calabogie being first and foremost with the Mustang pool, but also Power Sports, Mortimer. And I'm sure there are more that are doing Champ Car and Lucky Dog now that are a great opportunity to rent, jump into a car, feel what those different platforms feel like. There's a lot of value there to learning those different platforms, understanding what a front wheel drive versus rear wheel drive feels like, just to be part of those conversations, but also think for yourself of what's going on there. For us, in terms of driving, we've broken down a lot of our test days this season into 3 different categories: drive, race, and win. And it was something that evolved over the past few years with us, but something that I thought would bring some value to a lot of you. When you approach your track day or a test session, have a purpose. Drive, race, win sounds basic, but it's really how we've broken down some of our tests being, is it driver based? Are we doing driver development to get someone faster? Is it race being racecraft, trying to hone your racing skills? Because it's very different when you're doing a lapping day or trying to go fast, you're focused on that. When you're racing, the fast driving needs to be subconscious. It needs to be natural for you so that you can focus your bandwidth on the race, on the actual chess match that's going on. Where is that driver? Where can I find time? Where can I make a slight adjustment to capitalize on where I'm quicker? And then win for us being how to win is really how to feel the car, where we do different setup changes. We may do tire pressure testing or tire testing here. We may play with some big changes on the car or some fairly small ones, but you only want to do one change at a time so that the driver can identify that and the team can know what that change did to the chassis. But just as a piece of advice for all drivers, when you go out there, trying to focus on what it is you're trying to do. Obviously, inside of each of those brackets, there are a lot of subcategories that you'd be focusing on, but having that purpose for the day and that intention really will help. From our perspective, it also helps us for what kind of support team we need and saving costs. If you don't need to do a ton of setup changes, we're focusing just on driver coaching. you may not need support techs, engineers, support engineers. Whereas if we are going to work on a test, then we'll bring that whole team out, and maybe we'll bring a couple cars and spread those resources out properly. Data acquisition and analysis. Obviously, we're a data-driven company. Racing is very much so data-based and engineering-based. And it's all about the feedback that you're getting from the car, from your tires. Obviously, the tires being the only piece that hopefully is touching the ground is the tires. So they're going to be your main communication point on what's going on with that car. So understanding the tire temperatures across the tire and what that means, but also understanding your data system. So as Trevor mentioned, we're working with AIM, not directly. We work with a few distributors that obviously have been great with us to get us products, being at Perry Auto in Montreal. But keeping that consistent platform to learn and be comfortable with how the software works and what those squiggly lines mean. That also helps you prioritize where you need to find the time. If you're 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds off pace, well, you're not going to get it all in turn one at Calabogie. We all know that. And the data allows us to really focus in on what area is costing the time and why is that. So you can work on a little bit of confidence or figuring out what of your inputs you need to work on to be able to achieve that time. So learning data and understanding that is quite important. Another way that we practice a little bit of data and some of those processes and the communications is using the simulators. We're very fortunate to have a couple of very nice driving simulators in the lounge, but they also use the same data software that we do in the race cars. So now with technology using iRacing and LiDAR scanning on some of these racetracks and being able to completely bring an entire race car into a video game from a physics perspective allows us to be able to use the same data software and approach the same problems from a driver development standpoint and understand what you need to work on as a driver. And from our experience, when a driver gets comfortable in a simulator, they still have a lot of the same habits as they do in the race car. So if they tend to look into the corner a little early and apex too early, that may cost them a little bit of exit speed. We can work on that on a simulator, and you can work on that at home and prepare yourself a little bit better for the race weekend or for the track day. On iRacing or on the sims, there are a number of new technologies, especially in the last year and a half. Now that there's been a ton of focus on sim and on online racing because of COVID, there's a lot of new technology that's come out. One, if you are on iRacing, I would recommend Virtual Racing School, VRS. It brings in the telemetry from the game, or extracts the telemetry from the game, puts it into a graphed format like standard data analysis software would, like AIM, like Motec. But it also is able to then identify what input the driver is doing that causes the loss of time, which is really important. And that's what an engineer and a coach is trying to extract and then coach the driver on. So if you've got technology out there at your fingertips to be able to use, if you are on iRacing, I do recommend using some sort of a software like that. Then obviously with data acquisition and data analysis means likely leveraging a coach or an engineer. For me, the easiest thing to say would be look at all NHL teams, all professional sports teams, a lot of professional athletes. They could be the top of their game, but they still have a coach. And I know from myself, from experience, I can coach someone based on their video and their data, but it is really difficult to coach yourself in the car and to have the awareness of what's going on, but then to be able to have the mental bandwidth to think about what am I doing to this chassis and how am I affecting that? I still learn and pick up time from guys like Jose and Rowan when we're at the track and they're looking at the data. And there are still things that they look at me and say, why are you still doing that? We're all working on things and we're all evolving and developing, and obviously different things in our lives are going to affect that. But leveraging a coach definitely helps for building up a lot of that speed and just finding that time and where to extract it. So with a lot of that together, obviously, if a driver is focusing on that and is in that comfortable car, has a good communication with their crew, has a good time on the weekend, focused on spares, you know what you need do with that car. Really using the test days for testing and learning and evolving, and use those race days for executing. You don't really have time to learn and develop when you're in the middle of a stint. So try not to find an extra second in turn one at Calabogie mid-race. It's not going to pay off very well, not often. But then keeping that together and working with that coach and working with that team, and then evolving those processes, evolving that prep, and then hopefully everyone gets a little bit faster. That's about all we've got right now.
Are you out of there yet?
No, but now Ralph's looking at me telling me that we need to have everyone sign an NDA if I keep talking. So from that, we'll leave it to any questions if anyone has any questions for us. Happy to shoot shit for a little bit and talk about a few things if you have any more. Signing off, Ron. Thanks for coming. If that's it for everyone, then we're all good. We'll be able to go across to the cottage and go to bed so we can come right back here in the morning.
Okay, if there's no questions, I really appreciate both of
Thank you,
you
guys.
coming to talk to everyone tonight.
Yeah.
I think it's been really informative. I know I've made a few notes. Yep.
All right.
Anyways, have a
Thanks,
pleasant
guys.
evening, and we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
If that's it from everyone, we'll sign off. Thank you once again. What's up? Do we have more questions?
Not really. That was
Awesome.